Shh. All right, so we're going to finish up High Gothic, and we're going to look at Flamboyant Gothic, so middle and late Gothic. Heads up, next Tuesday we have a test.
What?
So, oh my goodness, it's okay. Calm down. Stop complaining. So, next Tuesday. Shh. I would like to talk.
Sorry.
Next Tuesday we have a test. This class is 33 through 40. So basically 33 through up to today. Okay. Good. So we don't have school Thursday and Friday. So tomorrow's the last day of the week.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're just going to be looking at two cathedrals. So we looked at Chartres. Chartres is also an example of High Gothic. The other most famous cathedral that is part of the High Gothic style is Notre Dame de Paris. There are plenty of others. There's lots. We haven't even really looked at many in Germany. We're going to take a quick glance at some of those next time. But again, since there were so many cathedrals that were built in the High Gothic, we can't look at all of them. We're going to do the best we can. Tony.
Should I say de Paris or du Paris?
No,
It's
well, day would be Spanish.
Because I saw something online that said de.
it might be day. I thought it was du. I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong on that. Could be wrong. Okay, so shh. So Notre Dame Cathedral. What does Notre Dame mean? Our Lady, right? So it's a cathedral of Our Lady. So Our Lady of Paris, right? It's the Cathedral of Our Lady of Paris.
Oh, that's Our Lady of Chartres, Our Lady of Reims.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep, plenty of those. So you'll hear Notre Dame Cathedral all throughout a lot of the cathedrals in France.
What's Notre Dame and what kind of language is that?
That's French. French. Yep. So it's considered one of the greatest examples of French Gothic architecture. Notre Dame is one of Paris's most famous landmarks. It's built right along. It's built actually on a small island, right alongside the River Seine. So the Seine is one of the main river, one of the main rivers that goes through Paris. Ish. It's small, right? So the cathedral's on it. There's a few other buildings on it, and that's about it.
People don't live on it.
No.
But what's the other river that?
In Paris, I'm not sure.
But the other river that goes.
Yeah, the other one, I'm not sure.
Is it the Thames?
It's Crack Lake.
No, that's London. Shh, guys. All right, so when did this all start? Like most cathedrals, when you say, when does it date to, we don't really have a great answer. We know when it started. The construction started in 1163. Pope Alexander III laid the cornerstone. Within about 33 years, the apse, the choir, and the new high altar were all finished. The nave was still nearing completion. Okay, so you can see how this is the River Seine, and then there's just these little islands dotted throughout. So this is the Ile de Cite, which is, and my French pronunciation is awful, but basically that just translates to the island of the city, right? The island in the city. Right.
So where's the cathedral?
It's right here.
Oh, it's centered around
That's
the
Okay.
It's like the center of the whole thing.
That's a scale.
Yeah. No, it's not a great drawing. So it started about 1160. We have people being able to attend Mass in it, 1196, but there's still plenty of work being done. The western facade is still going to be completed about 1250. Also during the 1250s, we have the transepts that are going to be remodeled. So it's all going to be done basically through the 1300s, late 1300s, okay? So it's all taking place, right? It's starting in the early Gothic, but it's really, the majority of the work is going to be done during the High Gothic period. And so it's going to become, because it is the main cathedral of Paris, because it is going to become, the Cathedral of Our Lady in Paris, they're going to have a lot of work being done on it. They're going to have a lot of funds, right? People are going to be able to, funds. So people are going to be able to donate more to this than they would to other cathedrals. People who are going to come and visit are going to be donating. So all things considered, starts about 1163, ends in the 1300s, so it's about a 200-year process that we're looking at. It's about average. It's about normal. All right, so how big is it? Pretty big. 420 feet in length. 12 meters wide, so 39 feet, almost 40 feet wide in the nave. So the main nave, we're not talking about the side aisles here, but just the nave, 40 feet wide. So basically, if you take the school's tower from base to top and put it on its side, that's how wide the nave is, right? 420 feet in length, right? So it's 10 times as long as it is just the nave is wide. The plan is pretty basic, actually. It's just that it's big. It's just that it has a huge scale to it. It's not really cruciform in style, meaning it doesn't really have those transepts that we see in some other Gothic cathedrals and later cathedrals. The plan itself is really Romanesque. Why? Well, because they started planning the cathedral during the Romanesque period, and then they started building it in the Gothic style. So the actual footprint of it comes from the Romanesque style. So that's why it kind of looks like that. But the pointed arches, rib vaulting, totally Gothic. It was one of the first Gothic cathedrals to have these exterior supports, these flying buttresses. Right? So we've seen buttresses before. We've seen how Chartres does it. But these are massive in scale. These are a lot bigger. And this becomes kind of the model for other cathedrals to start to use flying buttresses. Wasn't actually part of the original plan, right? Because they started building it pretty early on. Chartres was starting to experiment with some of the flying buttresses at the time. Other cathedrals were starting to experiment with it. And so they started building some of this area, some of the choir area. Remember, the nave wasn't done until a little bit later. They started building this area right here, and they start to see some cracks. There's going to be starting to see some stress in the walls. And so they go, okay, we need to do some work. So these,
the buttresses were added on later?
They were added on. They weren't part of the original plan. They were added on as they were building. But once they start getting up here to the roof area, they go, whoops, cracks. All right, let's buttress it.
It's like my mental.
What?
Notre Dame is also famous for its external statues and gargoyles, so that kind of gives you an idea of how the flying buttresses are working, right? So we have, so here's the main nave, and then we have the second aisle, and then we have a third aisle, and a fourth aisle, and then flying over on top of each of it are these buttresses.
Hunchback there?
Get it? Hunchback Notre Dame.
Hunchback is there. Notre Dame is also famous for the gargoyles. These gargoyles. Now, they have a
They're so cool.
fairly specific use, or at least some of them have a fairly specific use. Not scaring the birds.
You're the demons in the evil outside of, and also just like rainwater.
Yep. So basically, these are rainwater. Not these ones in particular, the ones that we're looking at here. These are just purely sculptural. And why are they scary? We've talked about that before in other cathedrals, right? The demons are facing out, right? They're screaming outside, right? Because they can't get inside the church, so they're outside. So it's this idea that outside there are demons, outside the church, inside the consecrated ground, inside the consecrated walls, there are no demons inside.
You said something about the water?
Yeah, and so other gargoyles actually act as rain spouts. So you'll see on some of them where there's gutters like this, there will be gargoyles down here. I don't know if I have a picture or not, but they're facing out.
You just be walking and then you just get sprayed.
I love those. I always see those things.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's why they're like gargly, because you like gargoyles.
I don't know. It's strange.
Gargoyles.
You just walk past the church and see them.
He's for real chilling. He's just like,
You guys ever seen those before? No.
So these are. So here's an older picture. Here's a newer picture. A lot of them have been damaged, right? This is limestone. It's going to get kind of damaged over time.
Well, it's because of the burn.
It looks
It's the
more-
fire, right?
No, this isn't because of the fire. This picture was taken before the fire. But there's just a lot of damage. Now, it is interesting because France has, when the French Revolution happened, we have to kind of take a look at how funding happens, and this is going to also play into the part of the fire. Churches in France are owned by the state, right? So this happened after the French Revolution. France is one of the few, in fact, I think it's the only Catholic country that does this, where the churches are property of the state, but then they are given,
France is a Catholic country?
well, we're predominantly Catholic. But the individual church, so the pastor of Notre Dame or the bishop of Notre Dame, he is in charge of it. He has to pay for the upkeep. He has to pay for all that stuff. But the The state owns it. So when we have things like tourists coming in and donations coming in, a lot of that is going to the local pastor or to the bishop, to the diocese, whatever. But some tax still does have to be paid to the state. It's not like the United States where where churches are completely tax exempt. There are some taxes that are owed to the state. So it makes fundraising a little bit more complicated. It makes upkeep of a cathedral a little bit more complicated, right? Especially nowadays when we're in more of a secular age, fewer people are going to church. Why would you want to give money to a building that's not owned by the Catholic Church or owned by your pastor? It's owned by the state, so you wouldn't want to do that. You still should, but in a secular age, a lot of people aren't doing that as much. So Notre Dame had, for many years, a pretty difficult time raising money. The cathedral was falling apart. It was totally just crumbling, falling apart, and there were no funds to raise, to fix any of this stuff. What happens? Well, the power of literature. Victor Hugo writes The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It becomes an international bestseller. Funds start pouring in from all over the world because people want to go to Notre Dame. They go in, it's crumbling, it's falling apart. There are literally bricks falling from the walls as they're going in and touring it. They're like, well, we need help. So the reason why we still have Notre Dame today, the reason why it basically hasn't collapsed or isn't in terrible shape today, thank you, Victor Hugo. Appreciate it. He raised awareness. And he didn't do it on purpose. He was just writing a story. Here's some examples of some of those gargoyles that are water features, so to speak. But they're basically, the water's coming down off the roof, and then the water pours out. Okay. So there's plenty of other examples of exterior stonework. We haven't even gone inside yet. So this is high Gothic, right? These spindly, right? These thin towers, these thin spires that go straight up. And then we have these rose windows. Again, this was being built just after Chartres was built. And so rose windows are going to become kind of the norm in a lot of these Gothic cathedrals. If you look at Reims, if you look at other cathedrals throughout Germany and France, most of them will have a rose window like this. And this was built according to the same sort of principles as we've seen in other rose windows, right? Of course, since it's Notre Dame, this is the main west-facing window. So this is on the westwork, or the west side of the church, the entrance. We have a depiction of Our Lady in the middle, and then depictions of prophets, martyrs, saints all throughout. And to give you an idea of the scale, it's big, right? It's really, really big. On the outside, we have lots of stone sculptures. And again, just like Chartres, we have a series of 3 portals on the west side as you enter. You can see these are closed off for the night, but usually the gates are open, and so you can go in. Usually one of the doors is open, that way you can enter. And again, same sort of thing. These were all crumbling and all falling apart, but over the years they've been able to be restored. So we can see what it looked like when it was originally carved. This is showing the Last Judgment. It's a very popular motif. It's a very popular design for the entrance into a church. Remember your judgment. Remember your last ends. Remember that what you're doing here, you're going in for your salvation. And so always keep in mind Christ as judge, merciful, but still judging, right? So we have Our Lady, John the Baptist, right? Other saints on the left. And then the just will be on his right, and the damned will be on his left.
Can you go back one picture, please?
Sure.
Why? Is there a reason that it's like that on the far left it's pointed and the other one is like not?
Like the outline.
It's kind of
Done later.
Oh.
Different times.
It's weird because it's like it's not symmetrical, but it looks cool. It's like
Yeah.
How would they do that?
weird.
Make it different. Oh, my OC. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, this is the new way to do it. Maybe there was some structural support here. Maybe, I'm guessing. And so they go, well, we need to put another pointed arch here to help support that. That's my guess. I don't know. Maybe they didn't have a brick, or it was a new master mason, possibly, right? Maybe this one was done first and this one was done second. I don't know specifically why. But it probably has to do with it was done at a different time. That's my best guess.
That's like close to contributing
What's that?
I think
the
it's
OCD.
Yeah.
I don't understand how they do those kind of things though. Like it kind of hurts my head.
How they carve it?
Yeah, like it just looks so nice.
Yeah.
Like,
Very tiny little chisels and lots of little sanding and it just takes time.
it
Yeah.
looks like they really did try to
Yeah.
I would not like the patients.
Yes. We do see a slight difference. Again, this was done later. This was done about 150 years, just this portal, remember, was done about 150 years after Chartres was completed. And so we see a development, right? I don't know if you can remember what the Chartres portals look like. Very long, elongated figures, right?
Yes.
We don't have that as much here. We're moving towards a more naturalistic style, right? As art is developing, as sculpture is developing, they're saying, we don't need to make people look like, you know, Gumby. We don't need to stretch them. Instead of having stretched people, we can have high relief, meaning coming out from the stone, high relief sculptures of these angels. So instead of having people that are really long, stretched along here, let's have them come out in a three-dimensional way, right? So it's a development of style that's moving over time that we're seeing that slowly. Again, 150 years difference. When we're studying art history, 150 years, it's not that long. But think about your lifetime, right? That's a long time.
Do you think like other artists before them thought of like the three-dimensional thing, but then like couldn't get it, sort of like they didn't know how to do it?
I don't know that I don't think so. I think they just didn't think of it.
Okay.
I think it's just creativity. That's my guess anyway. But again, we see, again, high relief, right? This is all part of the same stone. So the figure of Christ and John the Baptist and Mary, this is all the same stone, but they're cutting in, right? They're really making it high relief, again, compared to Chartres. It's a development in style. All right, so, and then we have the interior. We have the altar.
Wait,
They show different colors like that.
was Chartres the one with the statue that was really big over the altar?
Yeah. So very similar. So again, altar was put in a little bit later, almost same exact thing. This was done in Baroque style as well.
The floor. That's
All different pieces of marble,
Gee.
Wait, so how did they get this design on the marble?
cutting out individual stones like mosaics.
Gosh, so it's kind of like a mosaic, but not.
Yeah.
Mega mosaic.
It is a mosaic, but it's made out of marble. We have a screen similar to Chartres, except this one's more see-through, right? It's an iron gate instead of stone, or it's an iron screen instead of stone. And then same thing, we have the ability for people to walk through. All right, let's talk about the fire.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah. But it's cool. It's great
Do
how they
we know
restore
what
it.
cuts
I
do it
remember
again?
watching this.
I remember when
Ah.
Dr. Buddha.
Do you know
Yeah,
what caused it?
Yeah. You're in this class.
Mr. Latham, do we know what caused it?
I don't think we know for sure yet, no.
He's a monk.
Welcome to CBS this morning. We're talking about one of the great symbols of Paris and all of Western civilization. It is still standing this morning after a fire that
So this
nearly
was the next
destroyed
morning?
it. Flames brought down the spire and much of the roof at Notre Dame Cathedral yesterday. And think about this, it's the start of Holy Week. This morning the fire is out and prayers and offers of help are coming in from all around the world.
The cathedral's main altar is covered in debris right now, but much of the historic interior appears to be okay, and that's great news. The fire started during a major renovation project. Seth Doan is outside Notre Dame right now in the heart of Paris, a familiar sight to millions of Americans. Seth, this is tough. Good morning.
Good morning. The Paris prosecutor is saying that they are working under the belief that this fire was started by an accident, and there are around 50 people working on the investigation. Paris today is stunned,
Seems like it was
is
an accident.
heartbroken, and newspaper writers
So we'll
have
look
been
at
trying
what
to put
happened.
those emotions into words. This headline reads, "Tears." This one reads, "Disaster." As vicious flames engulfed the 850-year-old masterpiece of Gothic architecture, France's president said a part of us is burning.
Like, I saw a lot of people crying on the streets, and it's all because it's the symbol of France, it's the symbol of generations.
The fire broke out in the attic around 6:50 local time, about 5 minutes after Notre Dame closed for the day. It spread to the roof at the rear of the cathedral. In less than an hour, flames spread to its giant spire, which just 13 minutes
So the
later
spire,
collapsed.
it's all made out of wood. The roof is all made out of wood.
400 firefighters
It's coated
battled, but at
in
times
lead.
appeared dwarfed by the fire.
It's coated in lead, but
Poured through
all the
soaring
framing
structure,
of the
fueled
roof
by the wood of
is wood.
1,300 oak trees that made up part of an interior network of wooden beams. Dropping heavy water from the air was not an option.
They were.
for
That's
fear
why that
it'd
scaffolding
cause
was
the
there. So you
entire
can see the
structure to
scaffolding
collapse.
something happened.
Two-thirds of
Someone
the
left
roof was
a tool up
ravaged,
there,
but
or
medieval stonemasons
maybe a
may have
cigarette.
saved
Probably
Notre
not.
Dame
I don't
by
know.
doing
Something
such a
happened.
good job on the buttresses that survived the fire. There was a rush to save artwork and artifacts. Paris's mayor said the Holy Crown of Thorns and other precious pieces had been successfully recovered. Today we're getting our first look inside, where the cross on the altar appears to shine amid the devastation. Stone saints.
All right. So again, what happened? What is the reason why that fire? And again, this is shocking to us, and this is crazy to us, because that doesn't really happen. But fires like this were fairly common in cathedrals in the time, right?
It wasn't like
There were-
Sharp destroyed like 5 times.
Sharp, yeah, 4 different times. Yep. So this is the scaffolding where they were working on renovations. They were doing some work, right? You can see some of the scaffolding here on the side, but something happened, and then we have the roof. So what happened? What was damaged? Basically, the whole roof collapsed. This was the scaffolding, and then this spire collapsed. And this was what really caused the problems, right? We have this huge wooden spire. It's very heavy, lots of big oak beams. That collapses, and it goes through the ceiling, just right in front of the main altar.
Oh gosh. So did the main altar get destroyed?
It did not.
Holy cow. Wild.
So this is the transept right here. The main altar is the main altar is a little bit further back, but this is the crumbling of the spire, and then some of the other roof fell through as well.
I wonder how hot it was in there.
So
Crazy.
nothing of the stone got. I was about to say that. The stone is like, well, that got.
So with most cathedrals like this, again, we have this vaulting, right, that helps support the walls, it helps support the ceiling. But then on,
Do you have to like replace the stone too?
well,
It didn't collapse.
the stuff that didn't collapse, well, yes, a lot of it did. So if this is the interior, so here's the walls, and then you have an arch of stone, right? But then over on top, you have all of these wood trusses, right? Like that. And then that is covered by a lead roof, lead shingles. Obviously not to scale, its proportions are all weird. So when you have fire that's burning all up in here, and then this big tower that collapses, it's gonna make a hole in that stone, and that's what you're seeing here.
What about the buttresses on the outside?
Those were stable, and those were saved.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's really sobering. All right, so there were lots of plans about what we're going to be doing. Like, how do we rebuild? What do we rebuild? There were problems with lead, right? All that lead melted. That's toxic, right? And so people who are working there have to be very, very careful. They're wearing protective equipment, et cetera. The nice thing, though, is that immediately afterwards, the French president came out. He came out that night, and he said, we will rebuild. Paris is hosting the Olympics in 2024, next summer, the Summer Games, I think in August or something like that. And he said, we are going to, and the next morning, he said, we will reopen by the Summer Olympics by that time, 2024. And everyone's like, you're insane. But he was right, so that's not what they're doing. I'll get there in a second. But they are going to be able to finish, they are going to be able to open by the end of 2024, and all restoration is going to be complete by end of 2025. So it's an immense work that they're doing, and it's kind of crazy. There were lots of ideas. Do we rebuild Notre Dame the same way?
That's kind of cool.
Similar to what we've talked about with Chartres, right? Do you rebuild the same way? Do you rebuild with something new?
I mean, is that glass stuff?
This is glass.
Whoa! How's that not shattered?
Whoa.
This is a drawing. This is a rendering.
But how would that not shatter though?
Right. So
It's like, it's so
That'd be
cool. It's
so
so modern,
cool.
but it's actually it looks so
so designers came out and they said, let's come up with different ideas. But shortly afterwards, they said, no, we are going to rebuild it exactly the same way. We're going to rebuild it exactly the same way as we did before. So there were ideas, let's do a glass roof, let's do a glass spire.
That's cool though.
And the people of Paris said, no, rebuild it exactly the same way.
Okay, that'd be kind of dope.
Stained glass roof,
Whoa.
fabric and glass. Again, there were all these ideas.
I got the money.
All right, so where are we at? This is a picture that was taken last week.
Oh my god.
No, not last week, sorry.
How great white it is.
Okay, so this is a picture before. So just before the fire, sorry. This is a picture just before the fire. So this shows what that spire looks like. And then here's their progress as of today. So they're not going to have the spire complete until 2025, it looks like, but the building will be able to be reopened.
So it's the big wall right there, like where the red crane is.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
So that's
the main altar.
so they're just working on making sure that all the stone is stable. So they're going through every stone and every piece of mortar and taking one stone out and remortaring it and putting it back in.
That is
I
absolutely.
don't know how people do scaffolding.
Here's another picture of the inside.
That's just a huge hole.
So then what are those like ropes hanging down?
So those are all just wires and supports and things like that this is right after the fire. Everything just kind of collapsed. But again, where do you even start? Well, you start with buttressing everything. You start with making sure that everything is secure.
Just
Yeah.
Wait, so what is that? Wait, is that scaffolding? Like, is it actually like that's gonna stay there?
No, they'll remove it. That's just so that they can work on it. They have to clean each individual stone because all the lead, right? All the lead, everything that collapsed, came out and went everywhere.
All that scaffolding up. It's gonna be a long time.
You're really good at Legos.
Yeah, no kidding. How did somebody think?
All right, so how do you restore this? How do you clean everything up? I don't know. Oh, there we go. So
On April 15th, 2019,
there are a couple really long
850-year-old
documentaries, not really long,
Notre Dame
45, 50
Paris
minutes long,
is undergoing
on PBS, talking about the whole restoration.
$500,000
How they're going to
renovation
old
of the fire.
forests to try to find the same sort of wood, trying to find the actual
When
stone.
a fire breaks
It's
out
fascinating
inside
if you have a
the
chance
oak
to look at it.
framework of the roof. After 90 minutes, the 400-ton timber and lead
400
spire
tons.
gives way and crashes through the stone vaulting. The fire destroys the roof and spire and leaves 3 gaping holes in the vaulting. With the loss of the roof and no protection from the elements for almost 2 years after the fire, the exposed stone vaulting was repeatedly soaked by rain. In the 18th and 19th centuries, restorers cast layers of plaster on top of the vaulting in case of a fire. This protected the stonework from the heat of the 2019 inferno, but not from the water used to fight it.
So with the roof gone,
This,
now you have
along
water
with
for
months
2 years.
of rainwater, washed salt from the plaster into the lower layers of the porous limestone. As the moisture evaporates, the salt crystallizes and forces the limestone apart.
So now all the
destroying
vaulting
the inner surface of
is
the vaulting.
damaged.
Geologist
Not good.
Veronique Vergès-Belmont will use a technique to draw the salt out from the stone. To extract the salt, Veronique's crew will coat the vaulting with a paste of clay, sand, and purified water known as a poultice. The water from the poultice is drawn into the stone, where it dissolves the harmful salt crystals. As the clay of the poultice dries, it draws the salt water out of the stone, saving the vaulting from further damage.
The poultices will be removed when they will all have dried.
They load the sticky mixture into a compressed air gun and spray it into every crevice. Finally, they carefully smooth the poultice across the areas affected by the salt damage.
And then later they have to go in and chip it
follows
all off.
Very, very closely the surface of the stone. We need to have a very slow
Not sure.
process until the vaults are dry. But this will take time, much time.
The poultice may stay in place until the new roof is built, and the vaulting is permanently protected from rain and snow.
So yeah, it's not a quick process. It's not an easy process
Wait,
to
what
get that
time did
done.
it burn down again?
When it was Holy Week 2019.
Were you like in the morning?
It was in the evening. It was,
Why wasn't anybody watching?
so there were some guards there, and so they were able to, alert the fire department pretty quickly. But it's a construction site, so once you're done for the day, you leave. Yeah.
What were they doing? What was the construction they were doing?
It was just basic restoration of some of the old roof.
Did people find out what caused the fire or no?
No.
Any guesses?
Accident, spark, don't know. All right, so let's move to Flamboyant. So Flamboyant architecture, Flamboyant Gothic is, again, the last period, right? We can think of it as kind of the the extreme version of Gothic. The Milan Duomo. So Duomo is basically a word that in Italian that means the main church or the main cathedral of the town. And this is Milan's main church. It's huge. It's absolutely massive. It is the 4th largest church in the world. It is the largest church in Italy.
What's the largest church?
St. Peter's is not the largest church in Italy.
No, in the world.
St. Peter's is the largest church in the world. St. Peter's is not the largest church in Italy because St. Peter's is in Vatican City.
Oh, so it's technically.
Got him.
Sorry. So this is the largest church in Italy. St. Peter's is in Vatican City. It is the largest church in the world.
What's the second and the
What's the
third?
largest church in the world, though?
St. Peter's.
What's the second and the third?
One is in Africa.
No, Vatican City.
Yep. And third is
Vatican City.
not sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't count.
So it doesn't count.
Wow. Okay. It took nearly 6 centuries to complete. Construction began in 1386. Final details were finished in 1965. So it took a very long time. And it takes so long that once the construction was done, well, they immediately have to go back and start restoring some things, don't they? And so that's what you can see. You can see the scaffolding around the spire. Same sort of thing. You better bet that they were taking notice of what was happening in Notre Dame. And they're taking all sorts of precautions to make sure that doesn't happen again. But you can see scaffolding along the left side there, alongside the north transept, and you can see scaffolding up on the roof as well. And you'll see that. When you go to a lot of churches, you're going to see scaffolding. You'll see restoration work happening on most of the churches you visit. It's just an ongoing, constant process to make sure that these are going to be kept right. This is a little bit of a wider church at its base than some of the other Gothic cathedrals we looked at, but it's also taller. They did it because Milan's a big city, lots of people, so they wanted to build a massive church, and they succeeded pretty well. You can see it has more of a cruciform plan, has the same number of vaults as Notre Dame, but it is longer, it is wider, it's just bigger, and it's much, much taller. So we have the nave with 4 side aisles, 2 on each side, crossed by a transept, and then we have our choir and our apse. The height of the nave is about 148 feet, so it's a lot taller than Notre Dame. It's the highest Gothic vault of any complete church. You can also go up to the roof. We'll show some pictures of that. And it's just hard to get into pictures how absolutely massive this cathedral is.
I think this picture does a great job.
It has,
You can see how small people are. That is so beautiful.
it has the piers are much bigger, much wider than we see in other Gothic cathedrals. It almost looks Romanesque in terms of the scale of the columns and in terms of the scale of the piers, but that's just because it is so tall.
Is that a curtain?
Yeah, so they're doing renovation. At the time of this picture, they're doing renovation work up here, and so there's some small holes, and so they're just making sure nothing falls.
So, no, I was just gonna say, like, it's crazy how, like, it was built back then, but we have all the technology today that
Yeah,
would make it so easy.
right. So another view of the inside.
Yeah, me too.
It is dark in there. Again, because it is so massive, and because we have these massive columns, it's actually hard to get decent pictures in there. So sometimes you'll see these color-corrected images. It's not very easy to kind of get an idea. So we're looking here on the right, looking towards the main altar.
Is that the pulpit?
Right. So we have 2 pulpits.
Oh my god.
Where's the pulpit?
It's around
That's the
here.
That's like that.
It's
That's like that. It's like
psycho.
that. What do you call it? It's
Wait,
like
where's
that. Porch around the whole house.
Right. So the original main altar, is back here. This would be the seat for the bishop. We have an organ.
Is that an organ?
We have an organ. There's another organ in the back
Gold plate? I was
because why not?
What are those? How are those hanging there?
Where's that? These?
All the hanging
No, on the,
pictures.
yeah, on the right too.
They're just, I'm not sure, from somewhere.
Is that like canvas?
Yeah,
The stained glass windows are massive.
they're huge. All right, so the
How
roof.
easily do they break?
What?
The what? The
Stained glass windows.
don't.
Well, like once you get like hail or something.
It shouldn't. It should be fine. On most stained glass windows, there's a pane of clear glass on the outside to help protect them. So that would break first. Yeah, so that's another picture of bottom left. Yep. Same sort of picture. So we have all of these flying buttresses, and again, this is definitely an example, a great example of this flamboyant style, right? Everything is decorated. Wherever you can put decoration, you put decoration, right?
They literally
This
took
like
that to heart.
cathedral, like
Yeah.
all the statues and stuff kind of reminds me of like the Beauty and the Beast castle.
Yeah, yeah, very similar.
I just that movie.
That's what Disney was going for.
Actually, no. The cathedral and the castle actually I'm doing was like based on.
So you can go up to the roof. So let's say you want to go on a tour. Let's say you want to go to Milan. You want to go visit the Duomo. Can you go in for free? It's a church after all. Can you? Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay.
You absolutely can. But if you want to go up to the roof, then you got to pay. You want to go down into the crypt, then you need to pay, right? Where does the money go? It goes to the church. It goes towards restoration things. So perfectly fine, perfectly legitimate, right? Again, they're not charging you entrance fees to a church. You can go to the church for free anytime. That is not simony. But going up to a roof, doing sightseeing, stuff like that up there, getting a tour, then you got to pay, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to go to a roof. Something like this would probably be like $10, something like that.
Oh, is it like the same as a chart where they have both sections and different side chapters?
Yeah, they would do the exact same thing here. Yep.
Okay, I love the stone though. That's so.
The stone is really, really complex. So even the spires on the top of a buttress. Again, this is not supporting, right? There's no reason for this to be here other than it's beautiful, right?
Whoa, is that like supposed to be God?
This is the very top,
So much stuff.
right? Again, scaffolding,
On a Catholic church.
It's King Titan.
and we have a gilt statue of Our Lady at the very top.
Oh, that's Our Lady.
It's actually
You're close.
Why is she
There's a different one.
why is she holding an axe?
Couldn't
That's
tell you. I
not-
don't know the story behind that one.
What is that called?
I like the chicken things they stand on.
Oh,
Halberd.
what is it?
Halberd.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
That
so
is so cool, King.
the design of the Duomo has not changed very much over time. But well, at least they haven't done a lot of updates to it, a lot of changes. But it was done, again, over several hundred years, over a number of contrasting styles. Art historians call this kind of a schizophrenic cathedral because there's just all these different styles. It's starting with standard Gothic, then it's moving to flamboyant. The majority of the stonework is flamboyant.
Is there any Baroque?
There's a lot of Baroque in there as well. And so a lot of people don't like this because they think it's just too much. There's too many contrasting styles. It's not one cohesive design. It's not one cohesive element. And this cathedral is why a lot of people in the later Romantic period, 1700s, said Gothic is awful. Well, they're looking at this and they're saying it's really excessive, and there's all these different styles, but they didn't realize, well, there's all the different styles because it was done at different times. There's this author, John Ruskin. He commented that the cathedral steals from every style in the world and every style is spoiled. The cathedral is a mixture of perpendicular with flamboyant, the latter being particularly barbarous and angular, owing to its being he goes on, right? Not a ray of invention in single form. Finally, the statues all over the worst possible common stonemason's yard species and look pinned on for show. Right? So it's just stuff that they would decorate their yard with. Oh, we have an extra one. Let's put it on the cathedral, is what this guy is saying. So there are some people who definitely have that opinion. You can have that opinion. It's fine. People love it or people hate it. People think it's excessive or people think it's grandiose and beautiful and extraordinary. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. So here's an example of, right, the Baroque style being added on. Right, so all these cherubs and all this extra stuff. It totally doesn't match with the flamboyant Gothic style, the more angular structures.
Okay, the stone is so pretty.
Okay, that window is like it's like Beyblade.
Yeah, so that's flamboyant, right? That's where we get the term flamboyant, that flame style. Okay. All right, so next class we're going to look at International Gothic. We'll look at some more Gothic in England, in Germany, and in Italy.
Sorry, what does Milan Cathedral stand for again?
The Milan
I
Cathedral?
mean, sorry,